I'm Jason Klom, and this is Comedy on Vinyl. The year is 1984. The album, A Truck Stop is the Best Place to Eat. The artist, Gene Tracy, for the record, that may not be the right year. We'll get into it. My guest this week is Joe Blevins. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, I'm just going to start this here so everybody knows this is a terrible album.
Well, okay. Now, I was wondering when we were going to get into that.
Well, I will say, I've turned down records this bad before, only this time I have somebody here who has dug into it, done the research, so I'm going to consider this a purely anthropological episode. And you wrote an article for Vulture. It was a different website then, right?
It was called Splitsider.
That's right, it was Splitsider, right. And it dug into, it was ostensibly about trucker comedy, but it was also about the portability of audio media going from the LP into tape media, which made it so you could go into your car. But it's interesting that this is the angle you took at it, though.
Well, yeah, I was surprised when you contacted me for the Comedy on Vinyl podcast because the albums that I'm going to be talking about, or the comedians that I'm going to be talking about, are apparently available on vinyl, I'm sure, somewhere in this world, but they were not intended to be listened on vinyl. But I will say that what led me to these tapes were vinyl comedy albums. And I would like to talk about that for just a moment, if you would let me.
Please, yeah.
Well, the way I got into these trucker tapes, which are 8-track tapes, not by truckers, but sort of, but for truckers, certainly, some of them are by truckers, was really through the party records. And I assume that you and your listeners would be familiar with party albums and party records. These would be the adults only stand-up comedy albums. Mm-hmm. And I found that whenever I'm in a foul mood and need my mood elevated, I immediately go to party records, and these are from Laugh Records, a lot of them, and these were artists like Red Fox and Luanda Page, and Mantan Moreland, even and the ventriloquism stylings of Richard and Willie, which is it's a whole world of these albums. And I noticed that adults-only comedy records that were, I suppose, meant to be played at parties or certainly listened to privately because they wouldn't be played on the radio, the stand-up albums were all by black comedians.
Yeah.
But there were also adults-only novelty songs, and these were sometimes R&B because there were groups like Doug Clark and his Hot Nuts that would play dirty novelty songs, but they were in an R&B mode. But then there were a lot of country ones. And then there were some that are in sort of a pop jazz style, people like Rusty Warren and people like that. And so I started looking into these adults only novelty records that are, for the most part, quite tame if you listen to them today. Yeah. But at the time, I guess, would have been very, very shocking. And I noticed, there's not just the black ones, there's also like country ones. And so I started looking into this country comedy, and then that led me into trucker tapes. And the way I even got that term was from, as I explained in the article, from Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah.
They would make a couple of jokes every once in a while about trucker tapes, like, the air filled with obscene trucker tapes, like when, I think there's a movie called Angel's Revenge where there's some kind of redneck villains and their hideout gets blown up and, the air filled with obscene trucker tapes and stuff. So I was like, what are these trucker tapes? And so I started looking into them, and I found out that there were comedy albums made specifically for truckers. And what made them possible, as you mentioned, was portable music, was the 8-track tape. And so then I started looking at the history of the 8-track tape. When did that come out? So that started in about 64, 65. Mm-hmm. And initially, people were reluctant to switch over to a new format, as anyone might be, because, they have all their collection on vinyl, why would I buy these little boxes that don't sound as good?
Sure.
And maybe, and I'm sure the first generation or two of 8-track tapes didn't even work that well.
Right.
So why should I buy all these? And the party records, like the LaWanda Page albums and the Red Fox albums, and the Mantan Moreland and Richard and Willie and all that stuff, that's all on vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
But it was originally sold as something to listen to in your car. And so who's driving all the time? Truckers.
Mm-hmm.
So a few enterprising comedians and songwriters. I'll maybe talk about a musical version of this stuff because
Uh-huh.
there's stand up, and there's music. Said, hey, maybe there's an untapped market here,
Yeah.
and truckers are on the road for days at a time,
Mm-hmm.
and they have their own they have their own lingo, they have their own language, they have their own culture. Um, and I think what you need to define a subculture is not just the rituals of you know how you spend your days, and also need to have like a shared language that you understand and the people in your subculture understand, but the outsiders don't understand.
Sure.
I think that's always important to have. So truckers definitely had that. And as it so happened, in the 1970s, just as 8-tracks were becoming popular, truckers were also having a cultural moment
Mm-hmm.
that lasted pretty much the whole decade, because it lasts right into the late 70s and arguably into the early 80s. And where truckers were seen as kind of anti-authoritarian, counterculture in their own way, anti-heroes.
Mm-hmm.
They were always against the cops, and there's a lot of anti-authority uh, motifs in these records that I'm going to maybe discuss here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and people who know me know that one of my other passions in life is documenting the life and career of filmmaker Ed Wood.
Mm-hmm.
Plan 9 from Outer Space, that guy, the worst director of all time. Johnny
Sure.
Depp played him in the movie. Everybody knows him. So Ed wrote an article in the 70s. He was a big magazine writer in addition to being a filmmaker. And he wrote an article called Trucking's a Ball
Mm-hmm.
about the trucker lifestyle. And it was so close to these albums because he pinpointed for me, when I was reading over his article, what makes truckers special, or what makes them kind of cool in their own way, is that they are anti-authority. Their hated enemies are the cops and government institutions that are
Mm-hmm.
trying to hassle them, and that comes up all the time on trucker albums if you're into them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but unlike your hippies, they don't have this kind of passive, peacenik, wimpy, wussy kind of persona. These truckers they're all men. They can handle themselves in a fight,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're both anti-authoritarian, which is good, but they're also macho at the same time. So you have sort of the best of both worlds in these truckers. And I grew up. I was born in the mid '70s, so I experienced a little bit of the trucker moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and certainly one trucker-based piece of audio comedy that certainly gained mainstream success is the novelty song "Convoy"
Sure.
by C.W. McCall, and that highlights something special about a trucker comedy, in that C.W. McCall does not exist.
Right.
C.W. McCall is an advertising character, uh, and he was created to I think sell bread or something like that, and and he had this song about the old, film up and keep on trucking cafe or something, and that was such a hit, this commercial, that they did a novelty song about it, and that was a huge hit in 1975. And if you listen to um, Convoy, it's almost unintelligible. It's almost so dense with trucker slang and trucker references
Mm-hmm.
that it's almost incomprehensible to the outsider. And yet somehow this song uh, made it, uh, made it big to the entire nation. Everybody was listening. Everybody was listening to Convoy. They made a Convoy movie,
Right.
and then there was a trucker. There was a few trucker TV shows. There was Moving On, and BJ and the
Oh,
Bear.
sure, yeah.
So truckers were kind of everywhere in the '70s, but that was mainstream. That was stuff that I'm not even sure if real truckers were into the song Convoy or not. It
Sure.
kind of sounds, it kind of the chorus of that song always sounds a little Broadway for me, for truckers, because I think of truckers as mostly listening to country. Um, but the stuff that I got interested in was the stuff that was directed specifically to truckers and was not popular with the mainstream. And of course, the best um, example of that is the comedian Gene Tracy,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Truck Stop, and the one whose album that you said was one of the worst you'd ever heard.
Uh-huh.
Uh, here's the thing about Gene Tracy's albums. By today's standards, uh, they're appalling by
Uh-huh.
today's
Uh-huh.
they're appalling by today's standards. They are filled with all kinds of uh, racial and ethnic and sexual slurs that would not be acceptable today. And most of the jokes are just those kind of guy walks into a bar kind
Yeah.
of jokes, or
Yeah.
guy walks into a whorehouse, except Gene will just put a smattering of trucker on top of it. So
Uh-huh.
rather than a guy walks into a bar, it's a trucker walks into a bar,
Yeah.
or a trucker goes into a whorehouse. Now, I was trying to find out whether Gene, whose real name I think was Ivan Eugene Morris, was
Okay.
his manager who came up with the Gene Tracy thing.
Okay.
And Gene put out this series of truck stop uh, 8-track albums
Mm-hmm.
recorded live, some of them at actual truck stops, with names like 69 miles to Gene Tracy's 69 miles to Gene Tracy's truck stop. A truck
Mm-hmm.
stop is the best place to eat. Um, I mainly knew them like at, yeah, a truck stop is the best place to eat. I think is probably one of the more famous when Gene Tracy serves you. But these are not famous to the rest of the world.
No.
They Nobody is like, when people talk about comedy albums of the '70s, they're talking about Richard Pryor
Sure.
and George Carlin. They're not talking about a truck stop is the best place to eat.
Right.
Nobody's listening to this stuff.
Even though it should be pointed out, this is a huge discography. If you go to discogs.com right
Yes.
now, anybody listening, look at this ridiculously long discography. That is,
Well,
it's crazy.
well, the truckers supported this guy.
Sure. Yeah.
But the thing is, what I was trying to determine was, and he was always introduced this way
Mm-hmm.
as a real trucker, was Gene Tracy a real trucker?
Yeah.
Well, what I found out was that he was mainly known before stand-up comedy um, as a circus promoter.
Mm-hmm.
And as a circus promoter, I guess you're always going from town to town to promote circuses. So he's on the road a lot.
Sure.
And he might well be driving a truck
Mm-hmm.
or just a regular truck, but I don't think he's driving an 18-wheeler. But he is eating at the truck stops, and he's hearing the truckers tell the kind of jokes that you might hear at a truck stop or at a barber shop. I used to hear those kinds of jokes at barber shops, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and he just is remembering them and then saying them on stage. Um, so that's basically what Gene Tracy's act consists of. It's basically he goes on stage and says, a guy walks into a bar or a guy goes into a whorehouse or something,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, we will and tells those stories that are a little story with a punchline at the end. And now, no stand-up comedians currently, I think in the year 2021, do those kinds of jokes anymore.
Right.
Nobody tells like those kind of jokes. But if you listen to the party albums that I was referring to earlier, the LaWanda Jacks, the LaWanda albums, the Red Fox albums, a lot of it is that kind of stuff.
Sure.
They're
Rudy Ray
always
Moore, definitely
Rudy Ray
that.
Moore. He will tell and one thing that Rudy Ray Moore did and Luanda Page, I called her. Um, that one that both Rudy Ray Moore and Luanda Page did was they would also make up little poems
Mm-hmm.
and tell you little sort of ribald or dirty
Mm-hmm.
poems, and that's something that you see a little bit in truck stop comedy. People telling little poems and stories in rhyme. I
Mm.
haven't heard Gene do that on any of his albums, but I wouldn't put it past him to do it. But I can't tell if Gene ever actually wrote any of this material himself, or if it was all just stuff that he heard.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I don't. He doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that would do a lot of writing.
Sure.
Um, I don't think so. I think he mainly just, uh, on the cover of one of his albums, he looks like Ralph Cramden from the
Absolutely.
Honeymooners.
Yeah.
Is absolutely what he looks like. He looks like Ralph Cramden, and I said I think I might have described him as a melted Buddy Hackett or something. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so if he has a specialty, his specialty, and one thing that he goes, and if there's something that makes his act unique, I guess, is he has a voice that he will like to do, and it's of a hair-lipped person.
Right. Yeah.
And that is something that he goes to again and again on his albums, doing the hair lip jokes. And I'm not sure why, like, that was,
Yeah.
uh, although I heard a Mantan Moreland album where Mantan also does a hair lip routine.
Interesting.
So maybe that's part of this world. You don't think of like the black comedy world and the trucker comedy world as overlapping,
Right.
but some of the joke formats are the same, and the some of the gimmicks are the same. Because I thought how interesting that Mantan should do like a hair lip routine,
Mm-hmm.
and Gene just did that over and over again. I think that was like something that the audience was waiting for. It was his version of smashing watermelons on the
Right.
stage or something.
Right. Right.
But um, so what was interesting to me was that within a pretty short span of time, you know, Gene only lived into his early 50s, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say it was a combination of his weight. He was an overweight guy. He traveled around all the time, which is a stressful life that's hard on your body. And I would assume that he's eating just a lot of truck stop food and probably drinking all the time out there on
Sure.
the road. And these took a toll on him, and uh, he died in 1979. Um, there is another comedian who I wish I could have found out more about, who goes by the name of Gene Tracy Jr.
Interesting.
And
That I had not seen. Okay.
he's put out some records. I don't think he's the actual son of Gene Tracy, but there is a guy who calls himself Gene Tracy Jr. Just as there's a guy who calls himself Elvis Presley Jr. who's out there on the world.
Oh my God.
Um, so Gene uh, just fires out album after album after album, or 8 track after 8 track after 8 track.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, you got to imagine a trucker in the cab of his truck, days on the road, and this was the opportunity to finally you can take your own audio with you. You're not dependent on what's on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that truckers listen to a lot of country music,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, I was just listening to some trucker comedy music just I think yesterday, and they were talking about, he was singing about being out on the road, and he was singing about listening to Merle Haggard, and I was thinking, sure, Merle Haggard, Johnny Cash, you'd be listening to that stuff. In my article, I talked about a guy named Red Sovine,
Mm-hmm.
and Red was a country singer who specialized in trucker songs. His most famous record is a record called Teddy Bear,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the little sick boy is at home, and he calls out on the CB radio to truckers, and then like a whole line of truckers shows up at the house of this little sick boy, and his handle on the CB is Teddy Bear. So there's this whole, it's a very schmaltzy song. this teddy
Mm-hmm.
bear. So, but it was, but Red was Red was beloved by truckers. So I think in their own way, in his own way, Gene Tracy was also beloved by truckers because it was music for them. It was comedy for them, and Gene was certainly not getting booked on Merv Griffin. He wasn't going on the Carson show. Um, I don't know. It seems like every time I wanted to write about comedy, I was always writing about these fringe guys,
Yeah.
who just missed mainstream success. But because I
Who
also wrote,
I would bet though that, sorry to interrupt, but I would bet some of them were like, well, fuck it, I don't need it, because whoever came up with this as a business strategy is rather brilliant. I remember years ago thinking I had this idea first. I'm like, hey, I should get into, I would never get into trucker comedy, but I'm like, I feel like this is an untapped market because I dealt with a lot of truckers at my old job. And I'm like, well, shit, this is a group of people with disposable income who are constantly on the road. I had roughly the same thought. And I'm like, boy, oh boy, there's a business out there. And this is that business. There's no doubt
well,
about it.
well, that's how it worked for Gene.
Mm-hmm.
Just the wheels started turning. I think he went to these truck stops, started, you know, meeting with truckers there,
Mm-hmm.
and just started hearing the jokes they would tell and think like, yeah, this could be a business for me. And what happened was, I think Gene may have, set the pace, and then other people started, not many, but a few,
Mm-hmm.
started making trucker comedy of their own. And I think the second most interesting person in trucker comedy history was a guy named Hollis Champion,
Mm-hmm.
who was a uh, who'd been a rockabilly musician in the 50s, and singing in that sort of Carl Perkins, Elvis kind of style.
Mm-hmm.
And he was out on the road a lot. And so then he started in the 70s. He adopted the persona of Elmer Fuddpucker and started doing these country songs about trucker life,
Mm-hmm.
like Mother Trucker, and the Damn DOT and Damn DOT Part Two. And one thing that will distinguish uh, the Elmer Fuddpucker records from Gene Tracy, not only are they sung,
Mm-hmm.
but uh, the Elmer Fuddpucker records. Now the Gene Tracy records are certainly risque. They're ribald. They're
Mm-hmm.
adults only. The Elmer Fuddpucker ones are just flat out filth. They are. He just goes straight to just. It's the dirtiest stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like really, really profane. And, um, but that's another thing about doing really dirty or offensive comedy. It keeps people out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of saying, this isn't for you.
Yep.
Get out.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to say the F word like every other line practically in this song because this ain't for your tea parties. This ain't for your sewing circle. This is for truckers.
Right.
And so I don't think Elmer, I'm not sure that Hollis Champion was was a real trucker either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but certainly he was out on the road. And when he would sing these songs about the Department of Transportation, the damn DOT, you see, um, that's not something the average person cares about.
Right.
Like they don't care about these like his complaints are like they make you stop and they have to weigh the truck and then they see if you have any mechanical problems or anything like that with your truck and you have to pay fines and
Mm-hmm.
you know he's singing about like I'm just trying to raise a family here, I'm trying to make ends meet, why do they have to come after me? And he's saying it with a lot more profanity than I'm saying it nice.
Sure.
He's not saying it so nice. So I'm like, this isn't something that the public cares about,
Yeah.
uh, but this is something that truckers care about. Um, and then what I've found is that trucker comedy has persisted. I mean, obviously, the days of the 8-track are behind us. Um, for all but a few dedicated collectors out there, I'm embarrassed to say that I I don't have a working 8-track player, uh, so I can't enjoy these. I can't enjoy these tracks the way they were meant to be enjoyed.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
listening to them digitally. I'm listening through streaming, which is, it's pretty. That's a pretty hoity-toity kind of way to do it. I'm not listening to the, and also I don't think I've ever been to a real truck stop in my life.
Uh-huh.
But the thing that I found about later trucker comedy records, and they're still being made, I guess, apparently, is that the early ones, at least you could sort of tell what they were about. And
Hmm.
in the Gene Tracy, there's not really a mystery what he's saying, because again, he's just slathering just a thin layer of trucker over top of creaky old jokes that have probably been told in VFW halls and stuff for years.
Hmm.
You know, but today's trucker comedy or recent trucker comedy, it sounds like it's in a foreign language
Yeah.
because it it's in it's absolutely indecipherable to outsiders, and that is the point of it.
Yeah.
So the point of it is that they're really trying to keep people out now. They really don't want, like, a Gene Tracy album. You know, I was surprised. I heard one person say that like the first place that they ever heard like dirty comedy records or adult comedy records was at camp,
Huh.
and because like kids at camp would share them, and that was where I first heard adult comedy records too. In my case, it was like Cheech and Chong records
Oh, sure.
because
Yeah, yeah.
and and National Lampoon tapes, and then because you'd have to look out for adults because both on Cheech and Chong and on the National Lampoon tapes, they would swear and they would talk about sex and
Hmm.
drugs and breaking the law and all of these things, and you'd feel like you were really getting away with something. So that was how I first experienced this record. But it's sort of like well, these current trucker comedians, um, it's it's not to attract kids or anything. Like
Right.
a kid who listened to these current trucker albums wouldn't have any idea what they were talking about. But my well, I did learn a little bit of slang from them, I
Uh-huh.
guess.
I
I've been
bet.
trying to learn some slang from them. One of the more common terms is lot lizard,
Uh-huh.
which I guess are the women, uh, possibly prostitutes
Hmm.
that frequent the truck stops and hit on the truckers. Those truckers are a lot lizards. And another term is lumper.
Uh-huh.
And a lumper is somebody who loads and unloads the trucks. And truckers don't want to do any. So there's this guy, Ernie Schill, and I would really recommend spending some quality time with Ernie Schill,
Hmm.
and his many albums. And his catchphrase is "I ain't no lumper." It's his
Hmm.
version of "You might be a redneck"
Okay.
or "Get her done." I ain't no lumper, and what that means is he's not going to load or unload uh, his uh, his own truck. He won't.
Okay.
He'll do the driving, but he won't load or unload his truck. But Ernie will do. I don't know that I've ever heard Ernie sing per se, but he will say stuff in rhyme.
Okay.
He will do stuff in rhyme, and a lot of trucker comedy of the musical variety, a lot of it ends up being sort of talk singing, and you can definitely hear that in Convoy,
Yeah.
for instance, where the chorus is sung, but then the verses are all, on the dark of the moon on the 6th of June in a Kenworth hauling logs, cab over Pete with a reefer on and a Jimmy hauling hogs, that kind of, well, that fits in with a lot of country music because Johnny Cash does talk sang a lot of his songs. He
Sure.
would tell these stories, and there's I'm sure this record "One Piece at a Time" by Johnny Cash, I'm sure was popular among truckers. That's where the guy is stealing parts out of a GM parts plant,
Mm-hmm.
one at a time, so he can build his own Cadillac at home. And that's a crazy record if you haven't heard it. Where he's basically he wants his own, he wants a free Cadillac basically from his work, so he steals it one piece at a time and then he assembles it. But it takes him so long to get all the parts that when he gets it together, it's like this Frankenstein kind of vehicle.
Okay.
And it's told in that sort of, talk, singing, rhymed kind of way. Another guy who did a lot of this was Jerry Reed.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And then Jerry ended up playing a trucker in the Smokey and the Bandit
Yeah.
movies. And I think Jerry is the guy that sang the trucker classic Eastbound and Down.
Yeah. He is. Yeah.
So that's Jerry Reed as well. And if you listen to a lot of Jerry's records from his heyday, a lot of that is rhymed, talk, singing, you know. And I've gotten into debates with people. I always try to defend the music of Jerry Reed.
Mm-hmm.
He's not one who's beloved by music critics or comedy critics, but I always think Jerry's was pretty funny, and I think he was a pretty good actor as well.
Oh yeah.
So some of the modern stuff is still in that mold, except now, of course, it's written in it's there's guys like there's Catfish and Little Brother Trucker and all these guys, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, you listen to it, and I think in my article I said that it was like listening to Elvish, it was like something out of Middle Earth. There was something like is this still English anymore? But so I wouldn't say that people who are interested in trucker tapes should necessarily start with the newer stuff, because you'll find yourself, as I did, like practically listening to a foreign language.
Yeah.
I would say, I guess, start with Gene Tracy. Um, it's tough to say, it's tough to defend this as comedy.
Sure.
This is the Comedy on Vinyl podcast, and a lot of wonderful comedy has been committed to vinyl records, and stuff that people would want to listen to over and over again. Um, Gene Tracy's stuff and most trucker comedy is at best disposable junk. It is not, and to many listeners, they will not be able to get beyond the slurs. They will
Sure.
not be able to get beyond the language of it,
Yeah.
and they will say, "No, thank you. This is not for me." But what makes it interesting to me and why I wanted to write about it was that this is a parallel show business. This is
Yeah.
not mainstream show business. Uh, but in a way, that again compares it to the black comedians that
Mm-hmm.
had been working in the previous decades. And still to this day, I think there are mainly black comedy clubs and black comedy circuits, but there are also black comedians who just go absolutely mainstream. But for many, many years, black comedians basically had their own parallel show business.
Yeah.
You know, it was a big deal when Red Fox started breaking through,
Yeah.
because that was somebody from one orbit of show business breaking through to another. He started appearing on television, and then he started doing comedy specials where he would just and albums where he would just do his act, his full tilt act,
Yeah.
and and mainstream audiences, by which I mean mixed race audiences, black and white audience, black people and white people in the audience at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
would start listening to it. And that is what's remarkable when you see later Red Fox specials, is that it's an integrated audience. He's playing in Vegas. He's playing to everybody.
Sure.
He's not on this, and then the term is the Chitlin circuit,
Mm-hmm.
basically. He's not on that Chitlin circuit anymore. He's mainstream. These trucker guys, they never, other than a few random things like Convoy by C.W. McCall, very little of this went mainstream. By the way, though, now that I mentioned Convoy, I have to mention an answer record to Convoy, which is one of the craziest records I've ever heard in
Think
my
I
life.
might know what you're gonna say. I
It's
possibly know.
it's called CB Savage.
Oh no, I don't know this one.
CB Savage by Rod Hart,
Mm-hmm.
and this supposedly scraped onto the Billboard charts, the country charts, and maybe the pop charts as well. It is very politically incorrect by today's standards,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a really strange record.
Mm-hmm.
I took notice because Rod Hart is from my home state of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And what people don't know about Michigan is that there are a lot of rednecks in Michigan.
I mean, we found out this last year when they went to the governor's house. But yeah, you're right.
Well, yeah, but
Same from upstate New York, though. I'm
what
from upstate New York, and I live in Michigan now. But yeah, absolutely, it's one thing people don't really talk about.
well, one thing that is underreported in Michigan is that a lot of the families that came to Michigan came from the South. They came up to Detroit, and in the case of my family, to Flint, because of the auto industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how my father's family came to Michigan. My father's older siblings, they were all born down in Missouri. And only the last couple, including my dad, were actually born in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up to Flint so that my grandfather could work at General Motors. And they brought Southern culture. They brought Southern culture with them, and you can, to this day, or at least, well, I'll say to this day, but I moved out of Michigan in the 90s. But you could hear up until the 90s, you could definitely hear the redneck accent
Mm-hmm.
in parts of Michigan. And one of the rare comedians to point this out is David Cross.
Oh yeah. Yep.
David in his act, David I think is from Georgia, I
Yeah.
think. And David said in his act, and I was glad he finally said this. He said, like, you can hear the redneck accent just about anywhere. You say, like, well, that's how we talk here in Michigan. That's how we talk here in Ohio, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy, Rod Hart, getting back to him, he did this record called CB Savage, and it was, I guess, an answer record to Convoy. And the plot of Convoy is that the truckers don't want to pay a toll,
Mm-hmm.
and so they form the biggest convoy, which is just a big line of trucks that I think stretches, by the end of the song, stretches across America.
Mm-hmm.
And and there's cops everywhere. And the big victory at the end of the song is that they crash the gate doing 98, saying let those truckers roll. They don't pay their toll at the end of
Uh-huh.
it. They don't pay the toll. They pay whatever it was, the dime. I don't know what it was.
Uh-huh.
This is back in the 70s. I don't think it was much of anything, but they don't pay the dime. Which I guess I'm getting off the topic, but that ties it to that the Rock Island line by Lonnie Donegan.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about being on the railroad and then the railroad guy not paying a toll at the
Oh
beginning
yeah.
of his
Uh-huh.
song.
Uh-huh.
So he says, he's so in a way the Lonnie Donegan Rock Island line is kind of a precursor to Convoy, because it's both about like defying the rules, not paying the toll.
Mm-hmm.
So this CB Savage is actually kind of told from the perspective of the cops
Okay.
that are, the Smokies, and that are constantly mentioned in these tapes, and all through, obviously the Smokey is the villain of all the trucker comedy, other than the DOT. Well, this record is about a cop who pretends to be gay
Uh-huh.
and talks to truckers on the CB, like flirts with the truckers over the CB
Mm-hmm.
to distract them into a trap so they don't realize that they're being surrounded by cops because they're so distracted by this gay guy on the CB radio.
Holy crap.
And that CB Savage, and it's available. It's out there.
Uh-huh.
Um, and again, it's very very stereotypical.
Mm-hmm.
In It's hard to defend as comedy. Again, this is hard. This stuff is hard to defend as comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, well, I mean, some of the other stuff that I've written about, I wrote about David Fry, the Impressionist, and I
Mm-hmm.
wrote about other regional comedy like the comedy of the Upper Midwest, where it's about hunting and fishing and things like that. I was kind of fascinated with that as well.
There's a whole, speaking of Michigan, there's a whole Yooper comedy, like little mini, like undercurrent.
Yes. And that was what fascinated me was that, oh yeah, like the Yoopers, I guess, are somewhat known to the
I
rest of the
weirdly knew
country.
about them. You know what? It was back in the days of when I first discovering MP3. So I downloaded everything that was labeled comedy, like an idiot, and
Yeah.
that's how I found out about them. Yeah.
So the Yoopers are somewhat famous to the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the country, a
Mm-hmm.
little tiny bit,
Smidge.
but
Yeah.
then there's a whole world of that stuff that's not known at all.
Yeah.
But just like with the trucker comedy, it's sometimes difficult to defend as comedy. It's like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, I'm not going to say like Bananas at Large or De Youpers or Shad Rap or some of the greatest musical comedians I've ever heard in my life. They're not.
Right.
And a lot of people will probably hear one of Gene Tracy's uh, 8 tracks and just kind of dismiss this guy as just a hack, like telling the kind of jokes that kids are telling on playgrounds or something.
Mm-hmm.
But what interests me is that it's just like with the Yooper kind of comedy, it's a separate universe.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chitlin circuit of comedy, that's actually been fairly well documented. There's books and there's documentaries about the Chitlin circuit.
Yeah.
With the trucker comedy and with the Yooper comedy, there's not so much. People weren't writing about it. That's why I didn't write an article about LaWanda Page or Red Fox, because no one needs me to do that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Nobody needed me to do that. But I was like, this is a whole separate circuit, a circuit that continues to this day
Yeah.
that the rest of the public has no idea about.
Yeah.
And that always interests me. That interests me wherever it pops up. And sometimes that stuff goes mainstream. Sometimes there will be like some hyper local music scene, in some
Oh
city
yeah. Sure.
that will eventually catch on. I think, or theater scene or something scene.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, the phenomenon of Tyler Perry was, had Tyler Perry never gone mainstream
Mm-hmm.
ever in his life, he would have still managed to make a wonderful living
Oh,
off of,
absolutely. Yeah.
of what he did. And one thing that Tyler Perry said that I think weirdly reflects on this trucker comedy as well. I'm always tying it back to those truckers.
Mm-hmm.
Is that he says that he was quoted as saying, "Hollywood knows nothing about my audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hollywood knows nothing about my audience," he said, and that's the way it was with Elmer Fuddpucker and Gene Tracy and Ernie Schill. They knew an audience that Hollywood didn't know, maybe even Nashville didn't know totally. And wherever you see something like that, uh, cash registers can go off in your head and think like, and in a way where these guys were in a way opportunists for sure.
Yeah.
But I will say over the course of recording all these albums in truck stops, and one I haven't heard by Gene Tracy, but which exists, he apparently did one over in England,
I
which
saw that.
I haven't listened to that one yet.
Uh,
I can't imagine. I don't know. Do they have trucker culture over there? I don't know.
this
they don't
is a
even
good question. I often wonder, like, it can't be the same because they're never going to be traversing the same amount of distance, just purely based on geography. But
exactly. So, but he did, I guess, record over there. But Gene Tracy, I would say, even if he was never a real trucker,
Mm-hmm.
and he always claimed to have been one, but I can't find any evidence that he actually was.
Mm-hmm.
I think he genuinely grew to love his audience. I think he really did love his audience. I think he loved performing for them, and they supported him, and they kept him going. And you might, I mean, the naysayer here is going to say, you know, he fed into all the he fed into all their prejudices, and he
Sure.
just supported them and in their prejudices. And that ties into another article I think I wrote about a comedian named Bernard Manning, who was a British comedian, and his stuff is very, very offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I was covering his career as being like, um, as a sociological phenomenon. He would be popular with a certain audience, a certain working class audience,
Mm-hmm.
and he was very not respected by critics. Uh, but a brilliant teller of jokes. He was a brilliant sort of storyteller and a brilliant stage performer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. Did you develop any kind of even grudging respect for Gene Tracy after a while at all?
I got about 8 minutes into it, and
Oh,
I had to
okay.
stop. Now, here's the thing: I have listened to stuff of this ilk before, knew where it was going, knew he's not okay. I can't say he's not a professional comedian because obviously, technically, he was. However, he was not a comedy writer. We'll say it that way. He wasn't a comic
Yeah.
in the traditional sense. Guy was a joke teller. I say traditional. He was definitely in the tradition of the closer to vaudeville
Yes.
circuit. You know what I'm saying? Like it definitely was
Yeah.
of that for sure.
We well, by the 1970s, especially, and
Mm-hmm.
you see it developing through the 19 well, maybe going into the 1950s and 1960s, and it come full flower by the 70s. People seeing stand-up comedy as a mode of personal expression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, when Richard Pryor hits the stage and starts talking, this is I'm sure Richard I think even had writers,
Mm-hmm.
but um, it's meant to be his voice, what is important to him,
Yeah.
and you can see Richard's voice develop. If you watch, I've been watching. It's wonderful. They're now rerunning the Ed Sullivan Show, and you can see like Carlin and Pryor when they were young, and before they kind of got more personal with their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just trying to be funny and just trying to be mainstream entertainers. But Gene is not expressing anything about himself personally.
Right.
Um, this is not a mode of personal expression for him. Um, he is, as you say, he's a joke teller,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you know, when I would listen to the Mark Maron podcast, which is, he often he's a comedian himself, and he often interviews other comedians. Uh, he would refer to those story kind of jokes. He called them street jokes,
Mm-hmm.
which is his terminology. And it was like, he was talking to a comedian and saying like, and the comedian said, "Oh, in the early days, I didn't really have any material of my own." And Mark Maron would say, "Well, what were you doing? Telling street jokes?" Like
Mm-hmm.
that would be like the hackiest, worst thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but street jokes work. I mean, they're hacky in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but um, they get a laugh generally. Um, I don't know if the last comedian I knew who would ever do them. Gilbert Gottfried would occasionally
Oh,
do
sure.
them.
Yeah.
Gilbert would occasionally do them. Um, I guess if you ever watch the documentary, the Aristocrats, I guess that was sort of a funeral for joke telling,
Right. Right.
because comedians don't tell jokes. the modern day comedian does not tell jokes. Nobody does jokes with punchlines anymore. I
Hmm.
mean, that's incredibly passe. And I would say it was getting to be passe by the time Gene Tracy came along, because I'm listening to other 70s stand-up albums. Um, I was listening to Robert Klein.
Hmm.
I was listening to Freddie Prinze, and Freddie Prinze doesn't do, he didn't do street jokes. He would tell about his life. He would say, he would talk about his neighborhood and the cockroaches in his neighborhood,
Hmm.
and we tell a little, he would talk about his life. It was coming from personal experience. And uh, Robert Klein did a great album called Child of the 50s. And he was talking about growing up in the 1950s. And he
Hmm.
was telling very, very personal experiences. And he was talking about civil defense and having to hide under the desk, and because the bomb was going to drop, Russia was going to drop the bomb, and you were supposed to hide under your desk, and how you'd have nightmares about it. And he talked about his teachers wearing, it would be these ladies wearing Boy Scout shoes, and I thought that was a funny little line about, he would they would these teachers would, they'd send these ladies out wearing Boy Scout shoes, and they would tell the kids, "No talking, no talking."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, okay." So that's a relatable thing from Robert Klein's childhood that people can relate to. And there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that in Gene Tracy's work. I'm sorry you I'm sorry you had to tap out after 8 minutes, but I would say don't go into these for comedy.
Hmm.
Go into these for sociology.
Yeah.
Go into these for archaeology,
Hmm.
um, and for these modern day trucker comedians. Now I think you probably have to be a real trucker. I don't think that they let pretenders make these albums anymore.
Sure.
I don't think there's room for fakers in this world anymore.
Right.
Um, One thing that they're doing is it's kind of an oral history, and it's maybe these slang terms, maybe lot lizard and lumper, terms like these, maybe they would vanish into the ether.
Right.
Maybe these would go away. Maybe no one would ever hear them if it weren't for guys making these comedy albums. So just like that Uper comedy, maybe this stuff is like carving it into stone in a
Hmm.
way, um, and getting it preserved somewhere,
Yeah.
because it's a whole world. I'm so glad um, the party records have been preserved, and I'm so glad that so many of them have been posted online and are so easily
Yeah.
findable.
Hmm.
Um, I would have to ask, are you a fan of any of the party records? Are you?
I have liked every early Red Fox I've heard. I was friends with the late Rusty Warren, and I have listened just as a matter of course, listened to I think almost every one of her records, which is hilarious because they are like 30% from the first one album travels to the next album. They're very much the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am. And hers specifically because I feel like she was genuinely a groundbreaker. So is Red Fox, but also early Red Fox is not nearly as filthy as you think of, and I was always kind of
Right,
delighted by how
right.
innocent it sounds. You know?
Yeah, you know, they're not as aggressively dirty.
Yeah.
Um, there's certainly scales here. I wouldn't say that Gene Tracy is very aggressive. I mean, there's some adult stuff. It's a little bit raunchy. It's not as aggressively dirty. That was why when I started listening to Elmer Fuddpucker and everything was F this,
Sure.
F that, I was
Yeah.
like, whoa, okay. And he's singing it too, which somehow makes it like more in your face.
Uh
Like
huh.
if somebody just says "f you," that's one thing. If they sing "f you," that's a whole other level of hostility.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, Gene's stuff is somewhat similar. I mean, he's not in the league of Lawanda,
yeah.
and he's not in the league of Red Fox. He's about in the league of Richard and Willie.
Oh, sure,
Richard
sure.
and Willie were a black ventriloquist act. The other one, people think of Willie Tyler and Lester, but this
Mm-hmm.
was the other one.
Yeah.
I remember one interview where they asked about Willie Tyler. Do you know Richard and Willie? And he says, "Oh yeah, I knew that guy. I mean, we ran into each other." And Richard and Willie, they have an album where it's kind of wobbly as far as comedy goes. You know, he's
Mm-hmm.
sort of funny and but there's a fascinating part on one of their albums where he like there's a white guy who in the audience who's heckling, and then the ventriloquist actually kind of does a back and forth with the heckler for a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like the kind of thing that normally wouldn't get preserved on a comedy album, but there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I can't say the full name of the album because it contains a very rude word indeed.
Mm-hmm.
But I will start that the first two words are funky honky,
Mm-hmm.
and give that one a listen.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he's no Red Fox, he's no Richard Pryor, but it's fascinating as a cultural artifact. And I've said if anybody ever wanted to get on my good side, what they should do is just send me like a whole crate of albums from Laugh Records,
Mm-hmm.
and and I would just lock myself into my apartment and I wouldn't come out for a week, and I would just listen to them. Um, the current label that specializes in trucker comedy has a very similar name. It's Laughing Hyena.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So I'm not sure. Is Laugh Records, is that Laff?
It
I
is.
think it
Yep.
is. It's Laff. Well, Laughing Hyena spells it Laughin. So Laughing Hyena, and they have a YouTube presence. Um, and I would say, and they post little bits and pieces of the comedy there.
Mm-hmm.
I would say check out Laughing Hyena on YouTube, and you get a sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to promise that you're going to laugh. I don't promise laughter.
Sure.
I do promise if you're into it, you're going to get a genuine sociological experience. You're not going to get, no, you're if you're really, I don't know, if you're really drunk or something, you might get some laughs out of it. But um, yeah, I think that that it's mostly interesting as historical curiosity. So when they started talking about trucker tapes on Mystery Science Theater, I
Mm-hmm.
had to check them out. I did. I found out what they're about. Um, and they are what you're hoping for. They're raunchy. They're very specific to a subculture,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I would say if people are interested, yeah, they should check them out.
Love it. I love it. I feel like I should also mention the one I thought you were referring to earlier is one entitled creatively Yavnak or Convoy backwards. There was a guy who went by the name Cletus Maggard in the Citizens Band, and he was by no means a trucker, an advertising executive and an actor. I interviewed his son a couple years back. Honestly, one of my favorite episodes ever because we dug into what that guy's real life was and who he actually was. He had a hit song a bit after Convoy and did a whole record of trucker music. And but it's all, I mean, it's as tongue in cheek as you're gonna get, and it's much more. Well, it's way less everything we've been talking about this episode. It's way less that, but it is more in the tradition of actual comedy, and not as offensive.
Well,
But it's something to like dig into for like there is another side to it, but it's very rare, and it was just about only this guy and maybe C.W. McCall.
well, you know, people are aware of country comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and people are aware of well redneck comedy, obviously because of Jeff Foxworthy
Sure.
and Larry the Cable Guy went hyper mainstream.
Yeah.
Then but there are always strata. You know, there's guys like Cletus T. Judd.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
And again, I'm not going to say that Cletus T. Judd is a brilliant musical comedian, um, but there's something genuine about that guy. I don't know. There's something where I feel like, um, whereas with, uh, although maybe I'll find out that he's like uh, Larry the Cable Guy, where it's all just an act, and
Sure.
you know, I would be devastated. I guess I don't want to dig into too much into Cletus T. Judd so that I don't find out anything untoward about the. But I just think I that to me is just always interesting. Any kind of subculture, and an interesting soundtrack album to check out
Mm-hmm.
is the soundtrack album to the movie A Dirty Shame, the
Mm-hmm.
John Waters movie.
Yeah.
And John packed that movie full of raunchy novelty songs.
That's hilarious.
It's very it would be very very difficult for me to say listen to this and you'll oh you'll have one of the great comedy experiences of your life. You're not
Sure.
going to. You're not going to. But yeah, you'll learn a little bit of something. Uh,
Yeah.
are you familiar with the song called "Truck Driver Divorce"
I don't think so.
by Frank Zappa? And he wrote a song called "Truck Driver Divorce," but he's definitely and it's making fun of uh, uh, truckers
Mm-hmm.
and but he's definitely writing it from an outsider's perspective. This
Yeah.
is um, this is him kind of looking down on the truckers um, and the lyrics go like a truck driver divorce. It's very sad. Steel guitars, probably weep all over it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about this guy who's delivering string beans to Utah, which is like Frank's version of like the most useless thing to do in the
Sure.
world,
Sure.
delivering string beans to Utah. And he finds out his wife or girlfriend is cheating on him while he's out on the road and stuff like that. And he's writing this mock country song. And it's totally written from, again, from an outsider's perspective. And the thing about these trucker records, maybe as dumb as they are or as crude as they are, they're all written from the trucker's perspective. They're all written sympathetically
Right.
to the trucker. And the Elmer Fuddpucker record, Damn DOT, is practically an anthem. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the Department of Transportation is trying to put restrictions on the trucker and like, why can't you leave the truckers alone? And so to the driver, this might be, this is their anthem. This is, their fight for your right to party or whatever it is, or I am woman, hear me roar. This is I am trucker, hear me roar. Um, so yeah, it's difficult to know what to recommend. Sample it. Take
Sure.
about half an hour of your life and sample it, um, and then you can say, "I tried it."
Yeah.
It'd
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
like people who don't ever want to try sushi. It'll be like people who don't ever want to try sushi. Like, well, try one piece,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can if you don't like it, then you can walk away from the table, uh, saying, well, at least I tried it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that in this journey through these trucker tapes that I've ever found anything that I would say um, is a great album. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it I just like subcultures. What can I tell you? I,
Sure.
I
Hey,
like subcultures.
I can appreciate
And you were
that.
saying you were saying somebody was disputing you that there is no such thing as trucker comedy.
Yeah, he hadn't heard
Didn't
about
somebody
it.
say that
Uh-huh.
and you can tell him that there is tons of trucker comedy. There's more of it than you could ever get through in a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I guess one of these days I'm going to have to be honest and just go to an actual truck stop and see if they can sell me any Elmer Fuddpucker.
I would love to know
I
what
always worry.
you can get now. Yeah.
I would be worried though that like, you'd go to a I'd go to a truck stop, and they would just smell the nerd on me, and they would just say, you do not belong here. So that's what I think. I think that's my worst case scenario. I don't know of any truck stops around here, but I don't know. There must be some because there's trucks around here.
Sure.
In fact, I live next door. and in fact, this was my punishment for writing that article. I live next to a strip mall,
Uh-huh.
and uh, right outside my window are the loading docks for the strip mall,
Mm-hmm.
and huge 18 wheelers are rolling in all the time, especially in the middle of the night. So, um, my punishment for writing that article for Split Sider was years and years of listening to actual truckers waking me up in the middle of the night so to deliver discount pants to Ross Dress for Less, which is, I think, maybe a step above delivering string beans to Utah. But that was what's real. The one right outside my window is the one for Ross Dress for Less. So um, if you ever wondered where those when those stores get their shipments, oftentimes it's in the middle of the night when because they want to do it when customers are out, when
Yeah.
the stores are empty. So they bring in the merchandise at night. So um, trucks are a huge part of my day-to-day life, and I've probably gotten run over by them like many, many times.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because I walk across the parking lot, and I've probably been run over by them many times. But again, like I wrote about the Yooper comedy. My mother was from northern Michigan. She was from, I don't know, Charlevoix or Alpena. I want to say
Mm-hmm.
Alpena. She was from up there, and we would vacation there occasionally, but I've only been fishing one time in my life. So um, that's another thing where I'm just a dilettante. I'm a day tripper, basically.
Yeah.
I although that was one thing I was glad to hear on a trucker record. I forgot who said it, but um, a trucker is talking about the things that he loves doing in life.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nice little routine about the parts of trucking that he likes, and he liked blowing the horn for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember, do you remember that doing that as a kid? Was that something you ever did as a kid? Was like
Oh,
signal to the
sure.
trucker,
Yeah, yeah, of
and then the
course.
trucker would blow his horn. So he liked doing that, and he said he would even like doing that for grown-ups. So
Hmm.
I, I've never done that to an adult as an adult. I never
Sure.
signaled to a trucker to like toot the horn. Maybe they do it. This guy seemed to like doing that, and he was one of the trucker comedians. I wish I had written down which one he was. I'm going to credit that to Ernie Schill. So
Okay.
Ernie, I'm giving you that. I'm giving you that. The other thing about trucker comedy is, as far as I can tell, is an exclusively Caucasian field of comedy.
Right.
There is
Right.
no diversity in the trucker world at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's diversity in the trucker industry.
There's a little, but not a ton.
Not a ton.
Again, in my experience.
I remember a few years ago there was talk about there being a shortage of truckers because people didn't want to go into the lifestyle anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I said, well, there's a movie in that, Trucker Academy,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
starring Jonah Hill. I was ready to pitch Trucker Academy. Uh, and my research was going to be listening to a bunch of these trucker CDs
Sure, of course.
and then writing down everything I could hear in those. And so I don't know why it was Jonah Hill, but I was pitching it as a Jonah Hill comedy, Trucker Academy. It seems like it's been a while since we had any kind of academy comedies. There used to be
Sure.
Academy. There was Police Academy, I think Ninja Academy, Beverly Hills Academy, Vampire Academy, and it
Sure.
seems like we've gotten away from academy comedies. So I was like, well, this has got to happen.
Oh
We've
yeah.
got this labor shortage in America. People are not wanting to go into the trucker lifestyle. Um, did that lifestyle ever appeal to you? Did you ever
No.
see? No.
No, not in a million years. It's interesting to me as a thing to see on TV. I always, I grew up loving like Smokey and the Bandit and all that stuff, and it was
Yeah.
enough to make me interested in that one record that we've covered on the show before. But yeah, beyond that, no. Only because I know the reality after dealing with enough
Yeah.
truckers. I'm just like, no, I'm good. I'm good.
I had a cousin. I believe my cousin Daryl was a trucker for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he was saying that it was a hard world to get into because uh, once you got all your proper licensing,
Mm-hmm.
things like that, your proper training, you couldn't necessarily get on. There's apparently some kind of caste system or a system to sort of keep people out.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so it's very insular. And again, that's another thing that prompted the article was that this is a very insular world. But apparently, it's one of those deals where it's tough to get started in it.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows? I don't think that the world of the trucker will ever disappear because we're always going to need goods to be trucked from one part of the country to the other, and I don't see a better way than truckers to get it there.
Definitely, yeah.
Uh, um, you know, showing how all this stuff ties together. I mean, I was just watching the classic Edward R. Murrow documentary "Harvest of Shame,"
Mm-hmm.
which is about migrant workers and and about the horrible life that migrant workers were living. But the other side of that was that they were picking all this stuff so that it could be trucked across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a positive film from that same era called The Truck Farmer, and that's about, they're presenting it as this wonderful thing, like thanks to the trucker, you know, people can have fresh vegetables and fruits all year round.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, so the positive version was the truck farmer. The negative version was Harvest of Shame, which is that, you can have broccoli in the middle of winter or whatever, but it just means that some guy is making like 62 cents a day or something
Right.
to pick it. So um, I don't see the trucker will ever vanish from the roads. Uh, they are part of the reason why I hate driving on the highways. I hate
Mm-hmm.
being behind truckers.
Sure.
So
Sure.
sometimes I will be stuck behind a trucker and think, now remember, you wrote that big article. You wrote like 1,000 words about trucker culture. The least you can do is just, you know, drive politely behind the
Sure.
semi truck. Um, but no, the lifestyle itself, I don't think I could. First off, I don't think I could last even 2 seconds doing it. But no, it doesn't appeal to me at all. But I don't know. I don't know. I would have to say I loved the movie Smoking the Bandit um, as well. Uh, it's weird that moment has definitely passed. The trucker as counterculture hero to everyone. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there was even trucker action figures and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
That has gone away. So it shows you how my every avenue of my life it comes together. Like I said, I found out about trucking a little bit from Ed Wood, and the other aspect of my life is that I do a weekly Happy Days podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's get to that. I was gonna ask you,
Well,
what do you want to
sure.
promote? Yeah.
Well, yeah, well, I always talk every week about what was on against Happy Days,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
and Happy Days for a season or so was on against a Claude Akins trucking show called Moving On,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't compete against Happy Days, and they were moving off. So Happy Days helped kill a trucker show. So, but yeah, that's one thing that I have to promote
Mm-hmm.
is the Happy Days podcast. These Days Are Ours. You can
Mm-hmm.
find it online at thesedaysAreours.libsyn.com.
Mm-hmm.
My blog is Dead to Rights. That's letter D, number two, rights, rights, .blogspot.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find coverage of Ed Wood and all kinds of other stuff on there. And the good thing about that is that in the margin on the right hand side
Mm-hmm.
are links to everything. So there's a link to my stuff on Vulture. There's a link to my stuff at the AV Club. There's a link to my stuff at the um, Weekly Humorist and Splitsider, and there's links to all that garbage in the margin of my blog. You can go there and it links to everything that I've written. But the main thing I guess I have to promote, I have to promote, is my book.
Mm-hmm.
Dad made Dirty Movies. It's a biography of the filmmaker uh, Steven C. Apostolov, the guy who directed Orgy of the Dead, Motel Confidential, Lady Godiva Rides Again, and all kinds of 60s and 70s adult classics.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this is all making me sound like I'm like such a sleazeball. I'm in all this dirty stuff. I do a Happy Days podcast. You can't get cleaner than Happy Days. It
Right.
is a G-rated, pristine show. So that book is available. You can get it at mcfarlandbooks.com or wherever you buy books. You could get it at Amazon. Dad Made Dirty Movies. People ask me, do you care? Like, no, I don't care. And if you want to just get the ebook, it's way cheaper than the paperback. Just get the ebook. And
Right.
you don't have to carry it around or anything. It's way cheaper, and the words are the same.
Mm-hmm.
So just get the ebook. We tell the story about how this guy, I wrote it with a Bulgarian journalist,
Oh, wow.
real Bulgarian journalist,
Mm-hmm.
about how this director escaped communist Bulgaria.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of a failed political agitator in his own country. So he came to America, decided on a whim to go into movies, and then decided from there to go into dirty movies. And that's what happened. And he raised 5 kids and was, a big figure in his local Bulgarian church. And, you know, uh, so he's a father by day, a dirty movie maker by night, or kind of the opposite. I guess he was making his movies probably during the day and then coming home to be a dad at the end of the day. But yeah, it's an incredible story. And he worked with Ed Wood a ton. He worked on with Ed Wood a bunch of times. He hired Ed when Ed was a hopeless alcoholic and couldn't get hired by anybody.
Uh-huh.
So definitely check that book out. And I would say, I mean, I was a freelance writer. I don't ever put that. I don't put that out of my mind as a possibility, as something to do in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really into that right now because it just wasn't making any money. The book didn't make any money. The articles made a tiny bit of money, but
Sure.
not enough to. I may be driving a truck before too long here.
Sure.
But you never know. I could start writing articles again. Unfortunately, that market is really dried up, especially for the weirdo kind of stuff that I write. You know,
Yeah.
There was this golden time when I could say, "Hey, can I write an article about trucker tapes?" And an editor would say, "Yes," and that
Yeah.
was great. And I just said, "Can I write about a guy who was famous for impersonating Richard Nixon?" And they would say, "Yes, you can. Please do." But that doesn't happen much these days. Now I got to write like clickbait stuff, and I can't really do it. I don't really have the clickbait skills anymore.
Yeah.
So I would say follow my blog. If I have anything to say, I'll say it there. And I got more stuff out in the world already than any of your listeners will ever get through in 10 lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I've written way too much stuff already. And just as when I'm interviewed, like on this, and as when I write, I always say too much and I write too much. So you can skip like every other sentence in what I write. So if you go back to the article about the trucker tapes, like skim it. You have to.
Mm-hmm.
I go on and on. I go on and on and on about. I don't know. I think I did a whole paragraph about this ad for the Beatles' White Album, and that's barely tied into the trucker theme. So you can skip all that stuff. But yeah, that's all I have to promote.
I love it. I love it. I really appreciate it. I love that this is something you have this deep knowledge of, and it's not something we've ever like covered in this kind of detail, and I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad you had me on here because the people at work, if I start talking about this stuff, they just walk away. They just don't care. Nobody cares about this stuff other than me.
I love it. Yeah, no, I don't know. I enjoy it thoroughly. Well, I honestly, I appreciate it. Everybody, please check all that stuff out. And I will just remind everybody the podcast is ending in a matter of weeks, so just keep an eye out for that final episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. And thank you guys for listening. And as always, have a good thing. Comedy on Vinyl is a production of StolenDress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Warden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klom. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. You can email us at podcast@comedyonvinyl.com. You can also send snail mail to P.O. Box 725165, Berkeley, Michigan 48072. Subscribe to Comedy on Vinyl on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Comedy on Vinyl, or find everything in one place at comedyonvinyl.com. A major portion of Comedy on Vinyl has been underwritten by Stand Up Records. Please visit standuprecords.com for all your comedy needs and tune in to the new Stand Up Records channel available on the Roku, where you can also find select episodes of this podcast. Visit StolenDress.com to listen to our other podcasts, watch videos, and imbibe freely of our multimedia content going back 15 plus years. StolenDress Entertainment.
Hey, it's my turn. Ah!